Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the world, the Cellarcast, episode 164. It is still blazingly hot. I don't want to leave my house. It sucks because I got energy. I want to leave the house, but it's so hot outside. I can only really leave after dark. So I'm just kind of boiling inside here, and I haven't done a terrible amount of stuff that I think is interesting to talk about in terms of my week. I'm in that relaxation zone period still, where I'm gonna start. I always take like about a week-ish off of doing any kind of work, so that I don't lose my mind. It's funny because I was actually... So the next video, I won't say what it was, but I had a plan for it. I had a concept for it. I know what the next video is going to be. And then I was like sitting on the bus and I was like, what? Why am I not going to make like a Halloween video? It was not a Halloween video idea. I'm like, what? Okay, so am I being stupid? Why would I not just do that? So, not really a spoiler, but yes, the next video is going to be Halloween themed, as I usually do in October. So, hopefully you guys still can't hear my fan, because I need it on. I can't put AC. The AC in my house sucks. It's incredibly weak. It comes through like the floor vents, and I can't install an air conditioning unit in my room because the way my windows are set up, they have this immovable, you know how they look. They're like these tall things, and they open horizontally. They open side to side, and they've also got these what are they called? Screens. They've got these screens that block them. I guess I could take it out, but I can't. I couldn't fit any conventional air conditioning unit in there, so I gotta rely. And I don't have a ceiling fan, so the air conditioner. I hate the fact that this house was built like this. I hate it. This was built by my grandfather, who did not know dick about building houses for anything. So there's no fucking ceiling fans anywhere. So I gotta rely on leaving the windows open and having a little fan over there going for a little bit of air circulation. Hopefully it'll get noise filtered out. We didn't have any questions from last time, but I do want to talk a little bit. I guess I could start with, I got a couple stories to talk about. One of these, it really shouldn't be controversial, but I think it's an interesting topic. There was a little bit of a drama with the game, the free open source game engine known as Godot or Godot. I don't know. I want to call it Godot, but I feel like it's Godot. I'll say Godot. It feels better to me. You pick your poison based on how French you feel like being today. So, this is like a stupid internet-y. You know how it's like, the weird thing about social media is how I feel like compared to even 10 years ago, it's way, way, way easier to find like far right content and voices. So this is like one of those weird internet like radicalization accelerationism products. This situation. Essentially, this story begins with someone posting a demo or an early build of a game they had made that was built in Unreal 5. And some fucking guy says, see, I don't know anything about the original game dev or anything, but some guy goes, see, woke studios can't make their own game engines. That's why they use other people's engines, because they can't make their own, which is like it's like the funniest thing ever. It's like this guy is the least worth listening to. Immediate opinion disregard. Like, there's a lot of people, you can read one thing they say and you know that they have I don't have to listen to anything else anything else you say that is even kind of related to this subject. Maybe I can ask you about like the ABCs and you could have that covered, but anything beyond that, I can get better sources for opinions. So there was this started a tiny little joke on the Twit Spaces, the Twitterverse, and the game engine Godot said, hey, they would send out this tweet that said, apparently game engines using existing game engines is woke now. Well, that's fine by us. A rainbow emoji, and then show us your hashtag. It was like Godot, but wokot, whatever. It was like it's a pun that probably works better visually, when you read it. Show us your games below. So I saw that, and you're like, that's a pretty innocuous tweet, right? It isn't even necessarily calling for like LGBT games. It's just specifically like Godot made games, you could say. Although I would maybe expect some LGBT or, I don't know, other minority group like devs might share their games under there, apparently this was a big fucking problem because you made it political, dude. So this whole stupid fucking situation unravels, and a bunch of like typical just like losers, people who tweet 20 times a day, people with the fucking Vatican City flag in their names, in their usernames, just people who are just get the fuck, please stop, I don't want to listen to you. Having this whole kerfuffle, this ends up leaking over into the Godot Discord server, where the one moderator in particular started aggressively banning people. And this eventually, I only saw the final form of this. Stage, which was Godot is killing their audience. They're attacking they're turning on their audience. Don't they know? This is, I don't know. Don't they know that the audience is going to be turned off by this? It's like, no, I think you're going to be turned off by this. And essentially, it was a situation that exemplified that. So it was just all this really dumbass fallout from it. Of some fork of Godot was created. There was like multiple of them, and none of them are going to go anywhere because fucking these people are like a super fringe group. And if you're going to be using a game engine specifically because it is not woke. I feel like, how many games? Do you think more than 5 games will ever be created with that? I think that's generous. I don't think those people are particularly, I don't know. The more that you talk to, sometimes I've had experiences, even recent ones, where there were people who I've spoken to who I thought were, at least somewhat on the level, and then you get them onto the wrong topic. And they start talking about like the DEIs and the agendas and how they're putting the black peoples in the games, and it's like, listen to their thoughts, and you just get this unfiltered level of their thoughts, and you're like, wow. It kind of reminds me of my dad was really big into the punk scene in the 80s, and being in that scene, he told me that occasionally, every now and again, he would be at a show and he would run into a skinhead or multiples of them. And just genuine, self-proclaimed, like self-identified neo-Nazis, right? He would run into like a skinhead, and I was like, what was that like? And he goes, well, I mean, sometimes I'd talk to them just because we were around. And out of, curiosity, I suppose. And he said, the thing you learn from talking to those people is they're not very smart. It's not the best and brightest that they're sending out into the world, I think as a rule, in order to be racist or bigoted in some way, I feel like being more bigoted correlates with being more dumb positively. There's a positive correlation. So it's just this stupid shit that's gonna blow over. Some fucking guy was making a big deal out of like, I'm a titanium level supporter. I'm gonna be pulling my funding from Godot. And titanium is like, he gives like $100 a month, which granted is not nothing, but they'll survive. I think they'll survive. And that's really what the lesson is. So I can talk about a personal. So I'll wrap this around with like a personal anecdote. So I do not have a particularly large audience, right? I don't have a particularly large community, but so the way that my subscriber growth works is that it's kind of a slow climb. Occasionally, one or two people might unsubscribe, and then but the amount of people coming in means that it's a net positive overall over time. When that's how it's worked the entirety of my channel, except for one instance. When I made my video on the history of LGBT games, which I thought, again, was a pretty innocuous video. I didn't think I was making any kind of hard political statement about policies or something like that. I didn't think I was very aggressive. I didn't think I was really soapboxing. It was, I suppose you could say that inherently there is some kind of political stance or political assumption you could make that I'm basically tolerant of LGBT peoples. But I thought that overall it was not like a really aggressive video. Just going over the history of LGBT characters and game developers and things like that. That is the only video I've ever uploaded, and within 30 minutes to an hour, I think I lost 16 subscribers. Which was like, whoa, it was a clear action reaction, because I never lose that many subs in one go. Like, statistically, that's a lot for the level that I'm at. It was a very clear response to just the uploading of the video and not even any of the content within. And I even got comments from certain people who unsubscribed. There were certain people who just clearly, like, were just bigoted, were not even subscribed to me in the first place, and just came in. And, like, that's, I could maybe anticipate a little bit of that. And you'll just remove them from the comment section and you block them from commenting, essentially. And the people who unsubscribe, I mean, that was funny to me. I'm unsubscribing because of this. And there was only one or two comments like that. But it's like, what do you think I'm going to do? Like, no! I liked having you around so much. Like what? First of all, you've never commented before. Second of all, oh no, dude. Like, even if you did, it's like, who's gonna make everyone else feel uncomfortable and unwelcome? No! Who's gonna make shit weird? Who's gonna make fucking gay people who are just living their lives feel on edge with you around? No, dude, you're such a crucial part of the community. The reality of the matter is there's a couple lessons to take away. Number one is you need to curate the community. You end up with the community that you deserve. And thankfully, I have not really had any big incidents. I think most of the people who are subscribed to me are kind of like, I don't know, kind of get what I do or the general vibe of my channel or me as a person. I think especially if you listen to this podcast, you probably do. And you have to root these people out. There is a I would call it a fallacy, but it's more like an insincere tactic that's used by intolerant people whose beliefs and ideologies are founded on intolerance, and that's that you have to be tolerant of intolerance. And the obvious answer to that is, do you think I'm stupid? Shut up. Kill yourself. Go away. No, I do not have to be tolerant of someone whose base beliefs is that they think a group of people is evil or inferior based on their race or their choice of like sexual or the not choice of sexuality, but the sexuality that they're born with or their gender identity. No. Or their religion, you know? Like, no. What are you talking about? This is so clearly like, because all that happens is when you keep those people around is they just make shit worse and they cause problems. All these people do is cause problems that don't have to, because they're intolerant. They're fucking shit stirrers, and you have to root them out. It's like a cancer, you know? It's like a cancer. It doesn't contribute anything. It's a malignant cell, and it doesn't matter even if they did contribute things. It's more beneficial that someone who is like a patron or a contributor to my channel, that they are banned and removed if they express like bigoted feelings or opinions, or they start coming in like, oh dude, how dare you talk about a gay thing? That's making it political. Politicizing gay people's identities as something that should be hidden. Every other kind of their politics is just fine. Oh, it's just fine for them to show it's because they're not actually political. All the stuff they believe in is just reality and it's truth. But when they see something that differs, whoa, hang on, what's this? There's got to be some kind of a name for that kind of a bias, because I feel like that's really endemic to a lot of people. Is everyone accepts, you know, there's a really interesting video of when what was it? In the US back in the 80s, I think there was a law that went into effect that it was like a federal law. Previously, it would only be at the state level was where it would be decided, but I think there was a federal law passed that everyone in a car had to be wearing a seatbelt. And there's these hilarious interviews, especially, you know, in retrospect, with parents with just like fucking a little 4-year-old kid in the passenger seat with no car seat or anything, no seatbelt, and they're going, it's an infringement of my American rights that you're going to make me wear a seatbelt. And now you look at it, it's like ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. But you grow up, you know, with that just being a rule, and it's just common sense to you. Now, I'm not saying wearing a seatbelt is wrong. That is, it should probably be legislated. There's also an even funnier one on bans on drunk driving, or new laws about like taking breathalyzers and stuff from at some point that was passed. And there's these fucking people going, look, oh, what's wrong with me downing a beer before I drive home? And it's like, a lot of shit's wrong with that. There's this bias we have where things that are totally normal to us, I think like the vaccine is one of those. It's like, you're violating my rights by forcing me to do this. And it's like, you're forced to wear a seatbelt. You don't think about it, right? You're forced to do a lot of things by the government under threat of some kind of a penalty. You're forced to do things by the state government, by the local government. But you just don't think about those. This is like a new thing. So it's now it's like it's apparent to you when something is happening, right? You don't notice all the stuff that you believe with that you're already desensitized to. You just see it. This is a very disorganized rant. But essentially what I'm saying is that the people who say things like that, I think, are worth rooting out of a community and removing, because they make things worse. They make people less comfortable, and overall, I feel like you don't have to justify it beyond that. I don't care if you are a contributor. What's more important is to foster a culture. So then you get certain things like, here's another funny observation. I find that a lot of people who are bigoted assume that everyone else is bigoted. Like people who are racist, right? A lot of them, the way that they speak, you kind of get this impression that they believe everyone actually is afraid of migrants. Everyone's actually afraid of all immigrants. Well, sorry, non-white immigrants. You know, the savages. Everyone's afraid of those people. The only reason that they would say that they aren't, and why we shouldn't, like, kill them on sight, is because they are under social pressure, or they've been brainwashed by the usually Jewish-owned state media. It can never just be that they're racist. It's got to be, everyone actually secretly thinks like me. And I assume that everyone, like, it's so obvious when you kind of have that in mind, of, like, things like they see a character in a thing who, like, little ways, right? They'll see a character in a game who is not designed 100% to appeal to them, and they go, dude, who asked for this? Who wants this? I guess not you. I guess not you. There's people who like a lot of things. Yeah, you have to cure, especially if you are in charge of a community in some way, or you are responsible for that community to an extent. This is part of the reason I don't have a Discord server, because that shit is annoying. I don't want to deal with it. I'll just moderate my comments section. It's better for everyone overall. So that's the lesson here today. You need to, it's better to root out these people, because they're always going to be a minority. That's the thing, is they think that everyone thinks like them, but it's actually quite fringe. It's just easy to insulate yourself with people who believe the way you do. So this is also partly serves as my way of rooting anyone out, because if anything that I've said offends you, I don't like you, and I don't respect you, and I don't want to listen to you. So leave a comment down below telling me that you're racist or homophobic or transphobic or something, and I'll block you from my comment section, and we can just move on. Or you can just, like, stop listening or something like that. We can just go our separate ways amicably. I want to talk about Ooh, my neck. I want to talk about this interesting study that came out. Mind you, this is one study, but it's got some neat, perhaps self-explanatory conclusions, evidence, data. But it's interesting to see it actually laid out in data in charts. This was performed by Media Research. The article here says, the title of the article, so you need, like, an account to see the whole study. I don't want to do that. So I read the article that kind of summarizes the key information. It's called Most Gamers Prefer Single-Player Games. So that is the headline doesn't tell the full story. Essentially what they did was they did this survey of... let's see. They surveyed a group of 9,000 people, it looks like, across the UK, US, Australia, Canada, Germany, France, Sweden, South Korea, and Brazil. Perhaps a couple other ones that weren't able to fit on that list. I believe South Africa was another one that I saw in the full report thing. They broke it down by age. So the chart that they have here breaks it down by age, and it essentially split, like, what's your preferred style of game? And they have 4 categories: PvE, which I assume is like co-op PvP, like multiplayer PvE. Sorry, PvE, which I assume is multiplayer PvE, like something like I don't know, like a Deep Rock Galactic, I guess. Couch co-op. I'm not sure exactly how that differs. Online PvP and single player. Single player is on its own. I don't know exactly how they didn't. I tried to find how they define what PvE was. It's the lowest of each bar. across every age range. So I don't know. It's not super. The most interesting ones are comparing online PvP to single player, because they have a breakdown of 6 different age brackets: 16 to 19, 20 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, and 55 plus. So there is a pretty clear and perhaps expected trend in the data. When you're at the 16, let's say 16 through 24, combine those two age ranges that they have, PvP games sit at about 40% preference and 43%. And then it only changes a little slightly on the older range, the older end of that, in like the early 20s. PvP is 43% and single player is 35%. So roughly, just about the same numbers. PvP has an edge over single player games. Then you get to the tipping point is around the 25 to 34 age demographic, where they are both roughly neck and neck at 40 and 41% respectively. And from there, it's just single player goes up, PvP goes down. In fact, all other categories go down. It is in PvE is always in last place, and then couch co-op in third. And it's essentially just the bar goes from PvP is preferred to single player is way up to when you get to 55 plus, which I can't imagine there were too many people 55 plus that they were able to survey. Just so the data is probably a little skewed in that there are less participants, therefore the data could be considered like an outlier. But among those, it's 74% prefer single player as the main types of games that they like. I guess for the market, because I don't think gaming has quite in a large way penetrated past like the age of 45. I think that the oldest that's useful to look at here is the 35 to 44 range, where single player has a roughly... This is so embarrassing for me that I have to do the math on this. 15%, a 15% lead on PvP. Now, to many of you, this is going to be unsurprising. Not completely unsurprising. I actually feel this myself in many ways. Now, I'm only 22, but I think that previously, there's a lot of factors that go into this. Number one is that as you get older, you have more responsibilities. PvP games tend to require a lot more grind. They tend to be, any PvP game worth its salt tends to be pretty deep, which means that to play it to a level where you are okay or good means that you probably have to put a lot of investment into it. There's a lot to sink your teeth into to learn. And a lot of people who have jobs and mortgages and families just don't really have that time unless they have a job that's more accommodating for that. The other thing is that PvP games are pretty much exclusively, for the last 15 to 20 years, have taken the role of games as a service. Really in the last, 10 years, at the very least. And games as a service have a couple obvious market saturation problems. So number one, they require a lot of consistent time investment, which sort of circles back to that first point. If I'm going to complete the Fortnite Battle Pass or whatever, if I'm gonna grind up to keep competitive with what's going on in the latest update or the latest characters or builds or cards or strategies or something, that's a lot of time investment. The other thing is that the attention economy only has so much. There's only so much attention to go around. There's this thing, I believe back in 2005-6, it was called the WoW problem, and it was essentially this idea that this misthinking, this error in reasoning that a bunch of business types made, which is World of Warcraft, oh my god, it's the hottest thing, and if you look at the numbers, the average MMO makes $5 million a year, or some number like that. If we can just get, that's the average MMO, if we can get to just hit the average, we're going to be making so much money. And then it turns out that the reason the average is 5 million a year is because World of Warcraft is this absurd outlier. The more, if you take WoW out of the picture, the data reads more like the average is, I don't know, half of 2.5 million, a quarter of that, much smaller, more humble. It's just the World of Warcraft makes so much money, it skews all the data. Because it turns out, having a bunch of games out that all require a bunch of attention and time investment, there's only so much to go around for even people with a lot of time on their hands. That's why in every genre, generally, there can only be like 2 or 3 major players. And everyone else is either fighting for scraps, or doomed to fail out, or has a super minuscule population of typically just whales. You would not believe how many MMOs there are out there that are inhabited just by like 50 people who spend like $1,000 a month or more on these games because they have a bunch of expendable income. So the actual appeal, I feel like I got a little off topic. The actual appeal of big online games as a service PvP things is limited generally to people who have a lot more time on their hands and who have not already had their time monopolized by other games, And as you get older, that's just harder to find. So personally, when I see a game is like 100 hours long, I kind of like, I don't have to go to a day job, although I do have a job that consumes like a lot of time. And it is playing video games, but it's different. I have to write about them and make videos about them. So I only have so much time, right? These weeks where I take, like these break weeks that I take, those are nice, but a lot of it is just spent like doing nothing and just resetting my mind and then doing hobby stuff and stuff outside of gaming as well. Sometimes I'm even social. So when I see a game is like 10 hours, I'm like, sweet. That's perfect. 10 hours, I can beat that in like a handful of days. I can put in a couple hour sessions after I'm done working, and then go to sleep or go to bed and chill out. Awesome. That is much more appealing. That's much more appealing to me. Also, you just have to think about the kinds of experiences that these games appeal to. A PvP game is not going to give you a very rich narrative experience, I'm going to talk about Metaphor Refantazio in a bit, because I played the demo for it, which I thought was wonderful. And it's like, that is a purely single-player game. Someone who is older and doesn't desire to have competition, right? You need a kind of competitive spirit or competitive edge to want to play something, a PvP game like a Fortnite or a CS:GO or something like that, or a PUBG. And I find that people, in their 30s plus are just like, I kind of want to just chill out, enjoy a cool story, or a game with some cool mechanics and systems, and just experience some art, Have a little art experience in my games. Which makes a lot of sense. Also, mind you, if you are like 50 plus playing games especially, your tastes are probably radically different. you've probably grown up with games that were almost entirely single player. And so you would have had to get, I mean, multiplayer gaming wasn't even really a big thing until, I guess, the 90s. I guess like the mid to late 90s with like Quake and stuff. But even that was sort of a niche market. It was big for the time, but it's very easy to have like grown up your entire life. And especially if you were a console player during like the 90s, it's like, oh yeah, no, I've pretty much just grown up on single player games. That's where my tastes lie. That's probably what I'm going to play. You know, people kind of get stuck into their ways and don't really branch out and try the newfangled CS 1.6 sort of thing. It's also, studies like this are interesting because, again, you know, I wonder if anyone from any kind of big publisher or anyone who's in charge of making demands of studios of what kind of projects to put into development, if they pay attention to stuff like this, because there's a big problem in the gaming industry of bloat. Budgets are bloated, numbers are bloated. There's too much development time is bloated, dear Lord. There's too much, it takes too much time to make, and it costs too much to produce. Meanwhile, a lot of like smaller mid-budget games can be pumped out faster, cheaper, and have more opportunity to make their money back. One of the biggest like death knells for the gaming industry, or for the AAA gaming industry, of like, oh, this is a bubble, is the trend that started all the way back in like the early 2010s of every game has to make the most money ever, and we're going to put a game out every single year, or we're going to have a live service thing, and we're going to extract the most amount of money from our consumers. And that ends up being completely unsustainable. It's too much if you have a big high-profile failure. Like, recently, Ubisoft's been having some troubles, right? Ubisoft's been going through some problems. First of all, Ubisoft hires many... I saw some numbers. They have, like, twice or close to, like, 3 times as much staff as, like, Activision or EA. And it's like, you guys don't have the value to back that up. Like, you're not making enough money to back that up. I would foresee, unfortunately, some layoffs coming, but it's one of those cases where it's like, you guys, like, you have so many people on staff, you make these gigantic bloated games where the budgets are completely out of control. We're selling 1 million units is considered a failure. We're selling 3 million units is considered a failure. They release in these rushed, horrible states because you have to force them out the door. And eventually it's just going to catch up with you. And you have a couple high-profile failures in a row, like Star Wars Outlaws, which didn't sell very well. And then, oops, we got to go through some major restructuring. And you look at it, and you look at numbers like from this study here, and you think, if they just focused on having a diverse lineup of games, a diverse lineup of software that, sure, have a big blockbuster or two in a year, but like have something smaller, have lots of different genres. This is something that I actually, when you look historically, I really appreciate about Xbox 360 era Microsoft, because they were very, I think, innovative and forward-thinking with platforms like the Xbox Live Arcade. They put a lot of money and effort behind supporting independent developers at a time where otherwise they would have only really been able to get their stuff maybe on Steam. Although the process back then, I think, was harder, you know, or on their own website, where the reach is going to be much smaller. And Microsoft saw a lot of potential in having titles like Castle Crashers, or was it? Did they also support like Alien Hominid, like that, which was just like a Flash game that got like a full remake, essentially, like remake the game for consoles, looking basically the same, just like an HD version. I don't know what you call it. Practically a remaster port. Actually going in on titles like that, and that resulted in a library that was very diverse and appealed to lots of different people. At the same time, you still had the Halos coming out, you still had the BioShocks coming out, you still had big titles that appealed to lots of different people, or appealed to like big mainstream audiences. And then once you get in there, once you get into the Xbox ecosystem, it's like, oh, there's also like a bunch of neat cheap games I could just download straight from the store, from the storefront. That's nice. I think I mentioned this back when I was talking about a while ago. I was touching on what's been disappointing about PlayStation's first and second party strategy for the last hardware generation or two, and how they've only focused on these big blockbuster titles, and it's been a little bit alienating, I think, to certain consumers, and makes PC look like a much more interesting platform, because it kind of is in some ways. There's a lot more variety. PC ports are generally better these days. All I'm saying, the point of talking about this is there are markets of people, like the older that. So the video game industry has this really interesting trend. I could make like a whole side video or something about this. I feel like I could give a presentation about this. The games industry has a really interesting, I don't know what you'd call it. It's like a sociology topic. Essentially, the audience of the core audience of video games, at least in the US, like North America, was initially like children. If you look at like the Magnavox Odyssey and the 2600 and stuff like that, those were marketed towards families. Those were marketed as things that the whole family could enjoy. You watch old Atari 2600 ads or something, and they got like grandma playing Warlords or something like that, and she's having a ball. Then, of course, Atari pulls out of the console industry, the console market to focus on PCs. The market just... And then Nintendo comes in like 2-ish years later and revitalizes it. And one of the major differences with Nintendo is that Nintendo marketed their games primarily at children. Like children and like teens. Middle school, elementary, middle school, maybe high school. Nintendo marketed their stuff towards kids first and foremost. They wanted to make sure that they were completely different. I talked about this a bit in my console aesthetics video. They wanted to make it known, obviously, that they were completely different from Atari. They weren't going to burn retailers like Atari had. And part of it was presenting games as a child's thing, as a kind of toy, and that they were going to market this in a very different way. As opposed to, it's not just a video game console, it does a bunch of things. It's like a multimedia thing. Look, we have a robot. That means that the core audience, who were usually like little boys, well, as they grow up, some of them fall out of the hobby or something, but a certain amount of them stick with it. And now they're teenagers, and you start looking at the later console generation. You look at the Super Nintendo and the Genesis. Genesis is marketed as being a little edgier. Comes out a few years later. You look at the N64. I don't know. N64 didn't have a lot of support nor a lot of games. But the PlayStation, you look at the PlayStation 1, and you're like, okay, now like they recognized there is a much wider audience of people that we can make games for. We can make games for teenagers. We can start kind of approaching the, college-aged market, let's say. We can make more adult games. We can have a spectrum of age ranges that we appeal to, and that's because the audience literally grows up. The audience of gaming is really interesting because it has grown up over time with the years, and you see that reflected in the types of games that are made, the way that consoles and games are marketed, and all this interesting stuff about the marketing perceptions. Like, okay, you get to like the Xbox, maybe the Xbox 360 era, right? And all of a sudden you hit like the 2000s, and it's like, oh my god, you'd think that it all they're trying to do is appeal to like frat bros. And it's like, why are they trying to appeal to frat bros? It's because they're trying to look, because some fucking 40-year-old marketing executive's trying to look hip. He's trying to look hip and be like, whoa, did you know Dead or Alive has boobs in it? Oh, whoa, this makes me want to chug some brewskis. Because they're marketing towards like teenagers who want to feel like cool adults or something like that. Up until now, you get things like the the trend of dad games. I find that's a term I've heard. That's like Last of Us or God of War. It's like games about being a dad. You know, parenthood. Like, how many games, genuinely, how many games can you look at from the 90s and say that a major theme of them is parenthood? There's been like a couple notable ones in the like have been pushed as first or second party titles. Obviously, God of War, Last of Us. There was that Returnal game, which I'm pretty sure was something about parenthood. Like, this is a thing now because there are parents. There's like 30 something people, 40-year-old something people who play video games now. You can make games that hit on themes that resonate with them specifically. Maybe there wasn't a market for that before. So the aging demographics of the games industry, I think that like as it goes on, it continues to get older. And I think that within the next 10 or 20 years, we'll see that it reaches, I think 60 is about the max where it really matters. I think once most people hit 70, people are not really making honestly anything for people who are like 70 specifically, like 70 plus. I'm sorry. You're yesterday's news. You're consuming things for the younger peoples. There are still things that are being made for older audiences, let's say in movies, the film industry, the music industry, and older. Like, once you hit a certain point, your tastes are kind of settled, and it doesn't really matter how much older you get. I think that once we hit that, like, 60, you know, that, like, 60s range of games, like, there's once like, someone's grandma is playing video games, I think that's the point where gaming will reach a level of like cultural saturation where it becomes a sort of a mainstay in the way that movies are. Because that's like when you get generational. There are like films are a generational medium. Music is a very generational medium. Books are as well, right? It never stops being a thing. Gaming as a fledgling industry, I don't think has reached that foothold. Quite reached that foothold yet. It's very strongly entrenched in our society, especially economically, because it's like the highest grossing entertainment industry that's out there. But I suspect that as we go along, more and more games will be made that appeal and cater to older audiences, and perhaps it will be seen as something that's actually viable to make games that are not just games as a service, squeeze as much money out of your parents' credit card games, and by big publishers. Although I doubt it. I think that it's funny because I find that there's so many people with business degrees, with like these economic degrees, where it's like your job is to understand business, but you're like bad at it, which is interesting. Because I feel like a lot of business is understanding people and what they want and what interests them or appeals to them. But a lot of people who are interested in business actually just like money and not like humanity. So there's kind of like a disconnect where they don't really understand what they're actually, like, who they're even selling things to. They're just like, oh, like a big cash cow. That's what you are. Anyway, I've been talking about this for too long. I want to talk about a little weird, really stupid, frustrating story that emerged. It came out a couple days ago about a Tekken 8 tournament, specifically the disqualification of one of its entrants. So there is a play. So this is a tournament called Tiger Uppercut. Tiger Uppercut is a tournament that is held in Thailand. It is for Tekken 8. They run a bunch of different games. It's a fighting game tournament. Tekken, Street Fighter, Guilty Gear, Grand Blue, Dragon Ball. They run a bunch of shit. This is considered a pretty major. It's like a $3,000 first place prize. $750 for third place. Damn, fighting game prize pools. Anyway, 234 total entrants, which for an in-person tournament, you gotta admit that's pretty big, especially for fighting games. This is a fairly significant regional tournament for Asia and surrounding areas. So Tiger Uppercut is part of the Tekken World Tour. So here's the way that this works. So a couple different major fighting game publishers, when they sponsor their own tournaments. Capcom's got the Capcom Cup. Arc System Works has Arc Revo, or the Arc World Tour. Bandai Namco hosts the Tekken World Tournament. And this is essentially the idea is to pool get all the best players from around the world so that they eventually end up at one big international throwdown to decide who's the best Tekken player in the world. However, that's very difficult to pull off in a centralized way when you have an international. It's not like something like a Dota where you need a team and the teams need like organizations behind them, and you have to like pay people out and fighting, and you know, you can the teams represent certain countries. Fighting games are very international. There's people from all over South America. I mean, Christ, fucking some of the best Tekken players are Pakistani, you know? Very international regions that are generally not seen in a lot of other esports. So it's hard, and it's also a single entry style. It's a single entry competition, you know? So it's, how do you organize that to actually find out who the top players are from each region? So what they do is essentially a mix of official Capcom tournaments, or officially like run, like this is the Tekken 8 specific tournament that is run by Bandai Namco or something. Capcom does this with their stuff. But then you also have a number of partnerships with regional tournaments, typically the larger regional tournaments. So if you are a member of, if you're competing for the Capcom, if you're going for the Capcom Cup, there are a bunch of different tournaments that are partnered with Capcom, and that means that they get, you know, the logo on the stream and everything. And when you enter that tournament, if you win, depending on the rules, maybe it's only first place, or maybe it's anyone who placed up to, you know, the top 8 of the tournament or something, you get a certain number of points. And then once you need a certain number of points to qualify for the final tournament of the Capcom Cup or the Tekken World Tour final tournament. I forget what they call it. That's what it is. So it's about entering lots of tournaments. Some of them are in person, some of them are online, and placing highly enough that you rack up points so that you can qualify for this final tournament. That is how they select the best of the best, and then everyone goes at it to find out who's the world champion. So Tiger Uppercut is a member of the Tekken World Tour umbrella. Winning it will earn you Tekken World Tour points. you can figure it out. So a player named XiaoChenChen entered Tiger Uppercut, got incredibly far, was just about to qualify for the top 8 bracket, like the finals of the, not the finals, how do I say top 8, and people who don't follow tournaments are like, what does that mean? It's like, it's the last 8 players, because mathematically, like, the way that the brackets shake out, it's pairs of 2 or whatever. So top 8 is like, top 8's generally a big deal. And in fighting games, saying that you made top 8 is quite an accomplishment for any tournament. He is just qualified to make top 8. He's on a tear, and all of a sudden, he's disqualified. Why is he disqualified? Because Xiao is from China, and China is not an approved country in the Tekken, in the TWT rule set. It is not an approved country. Why is it not? I'm not entirely sure. There's an article from VG247, courtesy of Connor McCarr, that goes over, kind of breaks the situation down. It'll be linked below as usual with any news stories I cover. And he points out that Tekken 8 has no dedicated servers in China. Now, the reasons for that is, when it's a fighting game, it's not like the games are not being hosted on servers, but matchmaking servers. Fighting games will typically have matchmaking servers, so that you don't have to manually connect to people to play with them online. The fact that Tekken does not have matchmaking servers in China, it probably has something to do with the country's the Great Firewall, as it's called, and the fact that there would be conflicts with, essentially, I guess, if you were a Chinese player, you would only be able to play with other Chinese players, and maybe they didn't see that. Maybe, I guess, they didn't think that it was an investment that was worth it if the people in China weren't going to be able to matchmake with people globally. That's my theory. That could be one reason for it. But for whatever reason, China is not considered a valid region for the Tekken World Tour, meaning that a Chinese player who would list them, who would represent, who would enter a tournament as being from China, you'll often write down your hometown of where you're from, city, state, country, however specific you want to get. And if you're from China, if you would be categorized that way, you're not allowed to enter, or sorry, not allowed to. You're not eligible for the Tekken World Tour, which is where the other thing comes in. You're not eligible. The other weird aspect of this, of why they felt the need to disqualify him. Tiger Uppercut is not like a Bandai Namco sanctioned event. And in their own rules, there's nothing prohibiting Chinese players from entering. They could have easily made the judgment that XiaoChenChen could have made his way through the tournament, and if he got to a place that would have earned him TWT points, he just wouldn't have gotten the points because he wouldn't be eligible because he's from China. But instead, they went much further and disqualified him, which is really bullshit. And there were people who knew him, mind you, okay, here's another important aspect of this that I forgot to mention. This is hosted in Thailand. It's an in-person tournament. XiaoChenChen flew in. He flew in for this tournament internationally for fighting games, which is not, it's not like you're, even if you place first, well, it's a $3,000 prize pool for first place. Okay, you'll make your money back on the flight, but hotel and food and all that, and anything else at the venue, entrance costs and all that. this is a real investment, which, yes, he's doing it for his hobby. Maybe he wouldn't go in with any hopes of making the money back that he spent getting there or breaking even. But at the same time, like, that's an investment. And the fact that he went so far through the tournament before you disqualified him is really bullshit. Lots of effort and lots of money and time spent on this. Might have had to take time off from work or something. Who knows? He was very upset. Apparently he was crying to some amount when the news came. I can imagine that would just be absolutely crushing. The other problem with this ruling is that it throws the entire tournament, the value or the integrity of the tournament into question. Because, mind you, we've just been talking about Xiao. Think about all the people he beat on the way to get there. If he had just never been allowed to even enter in the first place, it's one of those what-if scenarios. If I was one of those guys, I'd also be a little upset. I'd also be like, what the hell? I lost to this guy and then he just got disqualified anyway for this BS reason? It would have just been best if he was just disqualified before when he just tried to sign up. They said you can't if you're from China, or if they just included that. If you're going to make that ruling, that they just say, if they want to keep it super strict to, we are going to follow the TWT rules, even though we are not run by Bandai Namco. We're just partnered with them. We're going to follow it to the point where we will not even allow you to enter if you are from a country that is not eligible for the TWT. If they just went out with that, okay, it's a little lame. It's a little disappointing, especially because, the international it hurts the international competition. Keeps those people from representing themselves. And their regions. But at the very least, you wouldn't have had this lame heartbreak situation. Oh my God, I feel so bad, for all the people who were involved in this. It's unfair. It's unfair to him. It's unfair to the people that he beat. And I think it's also I'm sure that for the people who ended up in the top 8, it was also a little, the uncertainty, of like, well, would I have lost to him? Did I really earn the spot that I got? It throws so many what ifs into the scenario, and what could have been that, not only does it really throw the integrity of the tournament, and like, what does it mean? Like, okay, if Xiao, who is on such a tear, right? Could he have won? Could he have won the whole thing? Maybe. It's not out of the question. It happens. And this is a pretty stacked tournament. Ni, Arslan Ash. There's some really top tier talent in this. I'm on the Wikipedia thing for this, and it's got like list of the notable entrants. I'm seeing a lot of Korea. I'm seeing a lot of Pakistan. I'm seeing a lot of Japan. There's also another aspect to this, which is take this to the logical extreme. Okay, what if all of the top 8 qualifiers were Chinese? What do you do then? Do you disqualify the entire top 8? The oversight here and the incompetence is really is just, it's killing me to think about, because it's like, what was going to happen? Someone should have caught it. I don't know if there's ways in Start GG, which was what was used to do signups for this tournament. I don't know if there is a way to exclude certain countries. If there isn't, there should be a feature like that. It should be someone's job. If you have a list of countries that you are not going to allow people to compete from, which personally I think is bullshit. I don't think it should be a thing. if you're going to have a list like that, have someone dedicate someone's job to like look through. I mean, okay. Genuinely. Oh, it's so much work. Tekken had 234 entrants. Street Fighter 6 had 123. Strive had 64. King of Fighters 98 had 25. KOF 15 had 35. Like, these are, some of these are not very large. The biggest one is easily Tekken, right? This is a big Tekken tournament. Grain Blue had 55 people. Dog, get the list and then hit Control F and type in China. As soon as the entries close, do that, and then, oh, sorry, dude, you're not allowed to compete. If there's no feature to just block people out automatically, go through the effort. I guess. Sorry, I'm. The problem here is that this was not a part of their rule set. Yeah, just a frustrating story. Disappointing, I think, for everyone involved. And it has caused a big controversy within the Tekken community. A lot of people, thankfully, are rallying around Xiao. And they are support. It was big enough that Bandai felt the need to release a statement about it. Let me see if I can find the. Let me see if I can find the statement, because. They released this. Oh man, why can't I find? They released it and then they didn't delete it, did they? I have to go. Let me go to the bill. Let's find out together. Probably released by Tekken, like the Tekken account. Yeah, Harada. I think Harada retweeted it. We had to disqualify a player from the Tiger Uppercut Master event who does not reside in an eligible country under Tekken World Tour 2024 regulations. Although we did our best to explain the circumstances to the player and followed the official rules, this led to an unprecedented situation. We understand that this situation has caused disappointment among some members of the community, and we will consider adjusting the official rules for future seasons. So typically, when something like this happens, Harada makes some kind of personal statement. All he did was retweet it. Someone replied to the original tweet and added him and said, Harada, please fix this. And he said, and Harada retweeted that and said, okay. There's so interesting things with the Tekken team recently, because this coincides with another Tekken controversy in which Heihachi's stage, which comes out as the same time as Heihachi, is not included in the character pass. And people are like, what the fuck, dude? I paid for the Ultimate Edition with the pass. I don't even get the stage. I have to pay $5 for it. It's the principle of the thing that people were getting upset about. I think it's bullshit. You know, I think the stages should be included with the characters. I don't like the nickel and diming. Oh, the games cost so much to make, then fucking spend less on them. Stupid garbage, right? And in response to that backlash, Harada actually did write a fairly long statement on his own personal Twitter, where he basically said that I get the impression, I don't think he said this like word for word. I kind of got the impression from what he said was that he used to manage Tekken in a more broad sense, in which he would be involved in both the creative and the business sides of the series. I kind of get the impression he didn't like the business stuff and just wanted to work on the games. So for Tekken 8, he has been purely on what he called the content of the games, and not like the marketing or the monetization or anything. And suddenly Tekken 8 comes out, and it's got these things that people don't like about. It's got this battle pass. They're selling you the default Blender orb. They're this thing with selling the stage separately from the character. Now this thing with the way that the rules are enforced. And I don't know if that has anything to do with business, but he said that he was, in this statement, that he was, because of the fan outcry. Honestly, part of it is just that Bamco sucks. They just kind of suck ass, and they've been like this for forever. They're like the Japanese EA. You know? Or Activision or something like that. And he's been rethinking how involved he wants to be in all parts of the company. And I wonder if situations like this have anything to do with that, because I don't think that he has any connection to like the esports part of the Tekken brand. And it's like, damn, is this thing just too big that one of the lead like creators can't really control all of it or effectively manage it, and so now parts of it have to be offloaded to the shitty company that publishes it, and then they just do this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's I guess I don't know if the situation is still developing. It looks like it's been a couple days and most of the dust has cleared, but certainly a very bad move on their part. And it's like, I don't know what. Okay, so first of all, like, why would you? Okay, I understand not having Chinese servers if there's some kind of internet related thing of they can't do global matchmaking. Banning them is weird because it doesn't feel like a political statement. I kind of doubt that they would. I mean, if you're going to make a political statement like that, there are other countries that you could also easily block or not have servers for, or not include in the world tour, that they haven't. And, and they had the whole goddamn, it's part of the Esports World Cup, which is run by Saudi Arabia, because they're trying to do that sports washing thing of trying to make them seem more friendly and less like despotic. So I don't know, confusing. Why did this happen? Why did it have to happen like this? Condolences to the people who were affected, I suppose. Yeah, interesting to see what kind of a fallout this is going to create. And if this is going to have any, because I don't know, Capcom doesn't do this. Why is someone not even allowed to go to the Tekken World Tour? No clue. Is it some governmental thing? Is the government going to be upset if you have a Chinese flag on stream or something? I don't know. I have no clue. All right. Well, we're done with that. We're done with all that. So now I'm going to talk about stuff I've watched and played. So first of all, did a very fun stream the other day where we watched a silent movie from 1928. It's called The Bat. I just kind of got it for like $1 at a used or / old media store, and because I don't know, intrigued me. So we sat down to watch it, and on stream do a watch along, because hopefully a silent movie won't get me copyright claimed that should, like, straight up, that shit should be illegal. Thankfully it didn't. The Bat is really good. I didn't know what to expect. I was not expecting it to be as enjoyable as it was. It is essentially it's a silent film. It's very Clue. It's a lot like Clue. A bunch of people in a house, in a big, old, spooky house. Some of them have relationships to each other. Many of them are strangers to each other. There's death. There's a hidden treasure inside of the house that everyone seems to want to get. Some people they have alliances with each other. Some people are working against each other. Sometimes they're betraying each other. Some people are not who they seem. Some people, you don't know what the hell their deal is. And it kind of revolves around the main... One of the... What'd you call it? The main... The eponymous character of the Bat, which, first of all, the Bat in this movie was a direct inspiration for Batman. There is a moment where there is straight up just like the bat signal. It's later revealed to be a very weirdly shaped moth on a headlight, but it's like, oh, it's a spotlight with a bat cut out on it. The Bat character, who wears a big full head mask of a bat, is like this kind of jewel thief. This thief who kind of slinks through the night, very stealthy, throws calling cards that are in the shape of bats. So not quite batarangs. And there's this very gothic, noir, dark feel and aesthetic to the whole thing. Essentially, the plot is that the Bat is this thief, this infamous thief. This takes place in New York. He's going to rob a bank. But he looks down through he's on the roof of the bank. He looks down and he sees that the bank is already in the process of being robbed by some mysterious man who gets into a car and drives to this old manor that used to be owned by the banker whose bank he just robbed. So this house is now, so that banker is dead. The house is now owned by this old rich lady who lives there with her niece and the maid and the butler. The niece is dating this guy who was a clerk at the bank, and they're trying to find the treasure. It's inside the home. They know that you kind of figure out like how people know what. So they're working together to find the treasure. There is the nephew of the dead banker who has tipped off the niece to the existence of the treasure because he's trying, and this house has like a secret room in it because he's also trying to scare off her aunt so that he can find the treasure because he got no inheritance, so he wants it. He essentially wants his uncle's money. There's like a doctor who shows up who is just weird and a little shady. There is the chief police detective Maletti, and just like this whole big cast of characters. And it's not, I think there's a stereotype when you think of a silent movie that it's going to be this really boring thing. But no, because it's a silent movie, there's a lot of movement and motion and things happening because it can't really afford to be that dialogue heavy. There are scenes that are a lot of characters talking to each other, but for the most part, it's just things happening because it's like, what, are you just going to have like a 5-minute dialogue scene? Like, no, that's boring. You're just constantly cutting to title cards to show the dialogue. So it's just stuff happening and the plot advancing and the mystery getting deeper and finding out information. And it was really fun to watch and theorize about who did it, what's everyone's intention, who is the Bat, is like the mystery that they set up at the beginning. Funny enough, there is this very quaint thing with old films. I first ran into it when Kat and I watched The Old Dark House. and they had a disclaimer at the front of that said, hey, heads up, Boris Karloff is in this. We know that you saw him in Frankenstein, and we're here to assure you it is the same Boris Karloff. He just looks really different in makeup. Because audiences would not have been used to such a dramatic transformation at the time that movie came out, like 1920-something. The Bat opens with a similar disclaimer that says, do not tell people the true identity of the Bat so you don't spoil it for them. There is literally a don't spoil the movie warning at the start. Like, please, for the courtesy of your fellow audience members, out of courtesy for them and their enjoyment, don't reveal who the Bat is. Because genuinely, the twist is really good. It comes at the very end, and it's a really good twist. The cinematography is really nice. It was based off of a play, and so there is a certain portion of the film, especially in the middle, where things kind of start to slow down a little bit. It gets a little more procedural, and you can really tell that it was based on a play because there's like 2 or 3 sets that are just rotated over and over again. Very large sets, typically. It's taking place in a big old manor. But it does kind of slow the film down a little bit. The ways in which it was kind of, you can tell that it was freed from the confines of a stage, and they could actually do unique things with being able to point a camera anywhere, are really cool, especially in the early parts of the film before they really establish the setting of the house that the rest of the movie takes place in. There is some really cool cinematography. There's this great shot of the aunt through a window. It's shot through a window, and it's one of those old windows where the glass panes are separated by like this border, and she's framed so nicely within one of the glass panes. It's just this really visually pleasing, very striking shot. Lots of stuff done with, there's some cool miniatures at the start of the city of New York, and the Bat kind of like along the rooftops. The use of light and shadow in certain segments of a room that's completely dark except for one window that the light is streaming through in the center. Really nice, visually gripping stuff. This has the copy that I have has the original did not have a soundtrack as far as I know. Well, obviously it was a silent movie. But this has a score that was composed for it in 2004. And the score is really nice. Sometimes silent movie scores that were done, decades later, sometimes can be a little hit or miss. This one was really, really nice for the most part. Didn't always quite fit the tone of what was happening, but generally stuck to that kind of gothic pipe organ theming that gave it a great overall atmosphere. It's just a really fun movie. Lots of humor, lots of jokes. That's also why I say it's kind of Clue-ish, is that yes, there is murder and there is intrigue and there are double crosses, but lots of jokes and comedic characters. I never thought about it until now because I haven't watched a lot of silent movies, but silent films have this kind of interesting halfway point between the stage and the talkies, as they were called when they introduced sound, which is that you look at theater acting, and theater acting is infamous for being theatrical. I mean, that's why we call it, when someone's being really theatrical or drama. It's because you're making big motions and you're speaking in this very exaggerated way. That's because when you're on stage, someone could be watching you from a balcony 50 feet away or more or something like that. You have to make all of your motions big enough that everyone in the whole audience can see what you're doing. You have to project. You have to put a lot of effort into the way that you enunciate things so that everyone on the stage can hear it. Now, silent movies obviously don't have sound. They have they have implied dialogue. They have title cards to show you the important lines that are being spoken that they will cut to, but there's also a fair bit of implied dialogue of characters having little exchanges. It's just kind of so you know what's going on, or it would make sense for them to be talking, and then you'll see what the actual important information is in the title card. But the one thing that translates over from theater is the expression. It's this interesting. Yes, there's a more exaggerated physicality to the characters, which is almost cartoonish. It borders on cartoonish, but it gives them these very strong personalities. And you look at now, it's like, okay, we have film, we can do close-ups on people's faces, and you can do medium shots where people's faces are very visible. You don't have to worry about, can they see it in the back row or anything? So people's expressions are still allowed. They can be subtle, but because they have to convey more visually, as opposed to through dialogue, through the way that they deliver lines, the expressions are also exaggerated, again, in a way that can border on cartoonish. But at least here, I think that's probably what separated the good from the bad silent actors, or one of the things that probably separated them, is how do you put on a convincing performance where you are exaggerating your expressions, you're exaggerating your motions, but you're not going so over the top that it becomes like farcical, unless it is literally a comedy, I suppose. So the facial acting is great. There are so many just funny expressions that characters put on. The maid is this consistent comic relief character. They do tons of jokes with her. She's like this total superstitious goofball. She thinks the house is haunted, and she's always freaking out about things, which then ironically comes back to where she's like, it's like a kind of a boy who cried wolf thing, where she sees something happen, and so people are like, okay, yeah, all right. And they just don't believe her. So fun performances to watch. Everyone does a great job. And man, I was straight up, I was guessing there were characters and there were plot points that I did not know. I was guessing up to the second that they were revealed. The reveal of who the bat, I don't even want to reveal it because it's a great twist. The reveal of who the bat is like the last thing that happens in the movie, and you just smack your head and you're like, oh, that explains so many things. Because you're like, I'm watching, I'm thinking, who could it? There's no one that makes sense. And then they reveal it, and I was like, oh, dude, how did I miss that? How did I miss? I never even thought that was a possibility. It's a genuinely great twist. There's twists before that are good as well. There's I don't know. It was a really fun movie. I would hope, I would say don't be put off by the fact that it's silent. Oh no, I can't hear people talking. And instead kind of, I think you should be interested in the fact that because it's silent, it's just stuff happening. It's just movement in the plot, I wonder, there's probably more cool silent films. Recommend cool silent films if anyone's got any down below. Because that was great. It was a genuinely really fun movie. I think it holds up really well. Weird fact about it, 2 years later, the exact same director would make a movie called The Bat Whispers. I was assuming, that's got to be a sequel. No, it is a complete remake of the Bat that was made two years later. A full remake with a brand new cast. And you're like, why? Well, the title might give it away. It's because they remade it in sound. Yeah, that's right. They remade it in sound, so they called it The Bat Whispers. Was that a thing? Was that like how games would call themselves like Super Castlevania or Mario 64 based on the the platform they were on? Were people remaking what's like, I'm trying to think of famous silent movies. I don't know. To the Journey to the Moon, I guess. Were they making Journey to the Moon Speaks? I don't know. But one or either or both of them served as the inspiration, as a primary inspiration for Batman. So yeah, I would check it out. It's probably on the Internet Archive. It's a very fun watch. It's only 88 minutes. Tight, fun movie. Some really cool cinematography. I liked the score a lot. And I don't know, just surprisingly kicked ass. The Bat. And now we're gonna get into video games. And speaking of things I really liked, I'm all positive this week. I played the demo for the new Atlas game, Metaphor Refantazio. It just came out. The reviews are glowing, and I'm here to tell you that if you are curious about the game, there is a free demo, and the demo, I'm not gonna lie, is very tempting. So, first of all, I was not super keeping up with this game, you know? Look, it's a JRPG. I will have a lot of time to play it. It's a big game. I'll have plenty of time. I don't feel a ton of pressure. But I was like, hey, I heard good things about the demo, how it was very beefy, and good things about the gameplay. So I can report back from what I played of the demo, which covers the prologue of the game. Damn. That was a good-ass demo. That nearly sold me on the game. That just, I'm on the edge. I'm on the edge, honestly. I wasn't planning on buying a brand new game anytime soon, but, oh man. So let's break down Metaphor Refantazio. Okay, so it's fantasy Persona. Alright, wrap it up. We're done here. Now, but for real, is it fantasy Persona? Yeah, kind of. I guess I can talk about the gameplay first because the plot is kind of a second. So I'll separate them out. Because the gameplay was what... Okay, at the start of the game, it's very simple. In fact, because it's an Atlas game, there is next to zero gameplay of like combat. There's like walking around, I guess. It's all just world setup stuff and plot stuff. It's a lot of cutscenes at the start. You get into the combat, and it's really simple. There's nothing that special. There's a couple cool ideas. I don't know how many... Okay, I didn't play SMT5, so I don't know if this is brand new. Essentially, what you'll do is you'll go into a field area. So the overworld is like a map with different points that you can travel to. And then once you get there, you'll walk around in what they call a field. Sometimes it's a dungeon. And that's where your character and your party is running around. And it's a very traditional Atlas style where you've got enemies on the overworld who... There are no random encounters. It's all enemies on the overworld who will run at you when they see you, and you do like an attack. And if you attack first, you'll get a bonus, or you'll get to go first or something. If they attack first, then they get to go first, or they have some kind of an advantage when the fight starts, when the turn-based combat begins. Refantazio, I don't know if this is a new thing. I don't know if this was in SMT5. Fantazio has this feature I do really like, which is where essentially you can do a scan with your little fairy companion, and it will outline the enemies. If you don't know what level the enemy is at, they'll be in like a white outline. If they're weaker than you, they'll be blue. If they're around your level, it'll be yellow. And if they're above, it'll be red. So if you encounter a yellow or red or white level enemy, maybe white, I don't know, there might be an exception, then you'll play out the combat, that you'll go into a combat scene, right? However, a blue enemy, someone that you are much stronger than, much higher level than, if you hit them on like the field, they will just die instantly. So you don't have to fight them, which is very nice. So number one, it's satisfying because there'll be a big pack of wolves or something, and then you just pop, and then they all just fall over. You hit them all in a row, and you get all the XP, you get all the bonuses, but you don't have to spend any resources. You're not at risk of taking any damage. You don't have to wait through the whole process of doing a battle. And mind you, the battles aren't terribly long. They'll take maybe 30 seconds for a short one. 20 to 30 seconds. but just not having to deal with that and not having the interruption for enemies that are not really worth your time. It essentially says these enemies aren't worth your time, so you don't have to really deal with them as long as you have the wherewithal to attack them on the field screen, in the field scene, whatever you want to call it. So I like that a lot. Because historically RPGs have sort of struggled with like, okay, how do we make battles meaningful or interesting at all levels? There are many solutions to it. In Earthbound, when you're at much higher level, the enemies will just run away from you. Here they choose to you can just get the experience immediately and essentially just get a free win over them. I like that. That is I think it's fun. So I like that stuff, I was okay with the combat, and then they really start introducing it to you after like the hour or two mark. They really start introducing the actual system. The more that the game opened up about what it really was, gameplay-wise, the more interested I was in it, until I was like, this is actually a cool system. So in short, it's a very traditional Atlas-style JRPG combat with weak points and elemental rock, paper, scissors and damage types and stuff like that, except it has a Final Fantasy-style job system. So in Metaphor, their equivalent of the jobs are what they call archetypes. Archetypes are things like warrior, mage, healer, fighter. It's, classes or jobs as they would be called in Final Fantasy. And it works much the same way. You have a currency that you can spend to unlock an archetype for a character. Every character's archetypes level individually. So you've got your main character, and you want to level like Seeker, which is the starting archetype. That's like a mix of, it's sort of like an all-rounder of, it's got a little magic and a little healing, and you want to level that one. But if you want to learn warrior, you got to spend a little bit of I forget what the currency is, but it's this currency that is used exclusively for this that you get from battles. You will usually have more than enough of it, from what I can tell. And then as you earn experience by using that archetype in battle, all of your skills, all your special skills are tied to your archetype. They're based off of what archetype you have equipped. The archetype will gain experience, it'll level up, and then you'll get more abilities and skills for it as you go along. They also include the fact that they tell you that once you max out an archetype, which there's 20 levels, I believe, you get to, I don't know what the process is, but there is some kind of, they call them advanced archetypes, which is, there's like 2 for each of the basic archetypes. There's like 2 that they can split into. I don't know exactly how that works. I don't know if you can unlock both of them or only one, and you have to like make it specific to that, or I don't know. But that is a thing. There is like a post, completion at level up. There's like, that's like the long-term goal for each archetype of maxing it out. Now you get a new one to max out. That's, I guess, even stronger and more specialized typically. So the archetype system, I'm like, okay, so this is kind of cool. I love the job system from Final Fantasy V specifically. I haven't played, so the 3 games that use it, I guess 14 uses it as well, and 11, but let's not count those. Those are like MMOs. It's a little different. 3, 5, and 12. I've played a little bit of 3, but it's like a little too old for me. It's like a little too stiff and a little slow, and I don't know. It didn't like super grab me. I get it. It's not a game I felt like grinding out levels in, which was like I loved doing in 5. Final Fantasy V is great. It is so much fun. The job system is a blast. And so any game that has a form of that, I'm really into, as long as it's relatively well balanced and well designed, and it's not too much of a huge grind. I don't mind grinding. I think grinding can be very relaxing. Just sit down and grind a little bit. But obviously, I have a line. So I enjoyed the archetype system a lot. It leads to these, once you get 3 party members, it leads to 3 party members, and you unlock 6 archetypes in the demo. I counted the ones on the spaces that were there on the archetype selection screen, and there was like 30 something basic archetypes Maybe the advanced ones are included there as well. I don't know. There's like 30 something, like 36 or 40 archetypes total. Maybe including the advanced ones. I'm not sure. But once you get like 6 under your belt that work relatively uniquely, you have 3 party members, you can start doing the cool part of having a job system like this, which is party compositions. Yeah, like straight up. Okay, so like one of my biggest complaints about Final Fantasy VII is that you're limited to only 3 party members, but one of them is always Cloud, so it's more like 2. And for me, I love the aspects of party composition in Final Fantasy VI and 5. 5, it's all with the same characters switching out their jobs, and 6, you have like 14 different characters that you can mix and match in your party, a party of 4, right? I really like the party composition is some of the most interesting strategic stuff because I really enjoy looking at the things that are on hand that are available to me and thinking what would synergize well, what kinds of strategies can you come up with? And so, I came up at first with a very basic one of, okay, I've got one character is set to be the warrior, which is all like physical damage skills. One of them is a mage who's going to be able to hit like the elemental weaknesses. And one of my characters is a healer who's just self-explanatory. Then I'm like, damn, I'm going through this dungeon, the second dungeon they offer to you at the end of the demo. And I'm running a little low on mana. Mana is kind of hard to come by. Maybe later in the game it will become more plentiful, or it'll be easier to buy mana replenishing items. But at first, at least at the point that I played, which was about, let's say 8 to 10 hours, I took it a little bit slow. Means of replenishing mana are few and far between. It's like you might find an item that does. You might have like three items that replenish your mana. Maybe. Other than that, you have to like go back to your home and rest in between dungeon runs. There is a system of checkpoints so that if you do end up, you're like, I don't have the attrition for this in my party, I can go back to the checkpoint and you can teleport between them in the dungeon, which includes to the very start of the dungeon, and you can go home and your progress is saved. So I was like, I was looking up like, okay, I'm having some troubles with MP conservation. Is there ways that I can more easily get it back or something? And I found someone who's like, oh, so what you can do is you can set 1 or 2 characters to be a fighter. And fighters have these really powerful physical skills, but they don't consume mana, they consume health. So you can set like 2 characters to be a fighter in your party, and this is just for clearing through the dungeon, not for leveling anything in particular besides like fighter and healer, I guess. And then set your third character to be a healer and just heal them up when they start getting low, because the healing magic is very potent. Magic in general and the skills are very strong in this game. Like you'll do your basic melee attack and it hits for like 22, and then you hit a weakness, you use a spell and hit a weakness, and it's like 200 damage. Like, oh shit, okay. So that's how it breaks down. Each archetype also adds to your skills, adds to your stats differently depending on which one it is. So obviously something like the warrior or the knight are going to be increasing your attack, your physical attack, and your health. The mage is going to be increasing your magic and all that. I think the coolest part of the combat system, at least as much as was revealed in the demo, is what they call synthesis. That's what it is. Synthesis abilities are essentially team-up attacks between specific combinations of archetypes. So, for instance, the mage has access to all single-target, like, elemental magics, is what it learns. Maybe it learns multi-target ones later naturally, but if you have another mage or a healer, they'll list like which, what are the other archetypes you'll need in your party to give you access to it. You can go to you can hit synthesis and you'll get a menu of unique team up abilities. And if you're a mage and you have like a healer in your party, that will give you access to the multi-target versions of those spells, and vice versa for healer. So healer gets access to obviously healing magic, but also light attack magic, like Maha or Hama, whichever one they call it. There's a couple of some of them are the traditional Atlas names, and some of them are like new ones. I think Bufu is still the ice one. Fire one it's like Bot instead of Agi, but whatever. So if you're a healer and you have a mage in your party, you get access to a team-up attack that's the multi-target light magic spell. So when you're fighting undead who are super vulnerable to light magic, you can just nuke them. You can just nuke the whole thing, and like straight up like the last fight that you get to do if you go through the whole dungeon that's available in the demo. I just blew through that shit because I happen to have like a mage and a healer. And it was great. It's really cool. It consumes both characters' actions. It's the same kind of, if you're used to SMT, I don't think do they show like the actions that you can take per turn in Persona, like Persona 5 at least? I don't remember. I don't know. But they do that in SMT where you'll have a little gauge at the top that shows how many actions each party member is going to get this turn. And this does a very similar SMT Persona style thing of like you hit the weakness and it only consumes essentially that the character who hit the weakness gets another action that turn. It'll go back to them. So if you are just hitting all weaknesses, everyone's going to be able to get to go twice. You're going to essentially double the damage that you deal. Or quadruple, because I think weakness also deals double damage or whatever, something like that. Doing the team-up attacks, the synthesis moves, consumes both characters. It consumes both characters' actions for that turn. The trade-off being they're typically really strong. Like, really, really strong. They're practically like super moves because you're spending most of your turn to use them in most cases. So they better be powerful. It's one of the coolest things. And I think like, man, I just want to get in. I want to level a bunch of archetypes. I want to see all the different synthesis team-up attacks that everyone's got. A lot of them have these really sick custom animations for doing these big super moves. Like, it's really big and high impact feeling. You can skip them, which is nice if you get tired of them after like the 50th time seeing it. But it is genuinely a very cool combat system once it opens up and it explains what it's actually about. It doesn't do that for a couple hours. Once you hit the end of the prologue, it does, but not for a couple hours. And honestly, in those first few hours, it was, okay, this feels like a Persona game or an SMT game, but stripped down and barer and way more simple. And I was a little bit on the gameplay end of what I was doing. I was a little bored, but what kept me going through it was the story. It was the plot. Atlas games are well known for having great writing. And I think that this one is going to be no different. I was very engaged in what was going on. The character writing is tremendous. I was very invested in the characters who join the party. Everyone's either cool or they have something interesting about them, or they have some strong emotion that's pulling me into caring about them. The conflict of the world is fascinating. If the Persona games, like aesthetically or setting wise, don't appeal to you much, if you like the SMT stuff more, people are calling this fantasy Persona, but I think in terms of tone, it's probably closer to SMT. SMT, Persona is often a lot of like personal, like their stories tend to deal with a lot of like personal issues. Personal, how would I describe it? there's a certain type of philosophy that Persona games tend to cover. SMT games, in my experience, from what I know, are more so concerned the realms of like ethical philosophy and sometimes political philosophy. And Metaphor is leaning much heavier into that. This game's about racism and classism. The very first shot, well, besides like after the establishing shot of like the main capital city of the world, or of this country, that you get is in these very nicely animated anime-style cutscenes with both English and Japanese voiceovers, which is nice, full support. The first shot is some kind of noble stepping out of like a restaurant and into their carriage, and the owner of the restaurant just hands them a bag of money. Just hands them out of goodwill. And then literally in the same shot, that's in the background, in the foreground, a beggar is being kicked in the face and turned away and called scum. And it's like, okay, all right, you're making a statement about what this world is like. It's a little bit difficult to summarize the premise of the game, because it sort of starts very like putting you straight into the action, and it doesn't hand you a bunch of exposition. Exposition is actually the exposition and the world building is very tastefully sprinkled throughout the game. It comes up naturally as the characters are talking about things. There are a couple moments of, okay, the main character should know what this is, but they're being stupid for the purpose of like, huh? What's that? Like, what are we here to do? And it's like, dude, like, this is like super important. Like, it's your fucking childhood best friend who's gonna like end the race wars that you're doing this for. Did you just forget? That's kind of the premise. It's drip fed. It's drip fed to you in little pieces and fragments of what's going on. But essentially, the bird's eye overview is that this takes place in a fictional country called Euchronia. Euchronia is home to a bunch of different fantasy races. I believe there are like 8 major tribes or races, and some of them are literally second-class citizens. They frequently refer to upper and lower races or tribes. And there is, I haven't seen anything. Actually, yes, I have. You do see. You go into this main city, and one of the first things you see is one of these lower race, a member of one of these lower races, like the dog people, being executed for a crime that he didn't commit, and a crowd cheering it on. And you find out that there are literally like regular political executions of people who belong. Obviously, the justice system and the policing system is corrupt, and they frequently target people. They pin crimes on people who did not commit them, just because it's easier to say that the person of that race did it, and you will not be challenged on that. And not only that, but the execution of these lower races, these more oppressed, marginalized races, is cheered on by a blatantly, proudly racist population of the higher races. So the main character belongs to a race called the Elda, not Warhammer, Eldar, the Elda, which looks just like human beings. They're stand-ins for human beings, essentially. They look like maybe slightly more physically small than some of the other races are. It's not quite sure. I think you're the, as far as I can tell, the main character is the only Elda who's in the story. So I don't really have a comparison point. But the Elda are considered so oppressed and were so persecuted that they essentially left most of society and are basically living isolated in their kind of, you know, like these self-segregated colonies away from the more oppressive races who consider themselves to be above the Elda. Your main motivation is first of all, you are a member of this oppressed race. And you face straight up discrimination in story of people will just pick fights with you. They will make comments about you. There's this little thing where as you walk past people, speech bubbles will pop up as you hear the kind of murmur of the crowd or just passersby or, random people on the street. And sometimes people will be going like, oh, why is there an fucking Elda here? Why is there some dirty Elda? You can tell that like guards will be more aggressive when you talk to them. They'll tell you to just like fuck off. They have that kind of a tone to them. There is a clear, like, putting you in the seat of being a race that is discriminated against. The main... as the story opens, the king, who has been kind of... was publicly disavowed the race relations... the negative race relations, but what you find out never really did anything. It was kind of just lip service. He never really put anything into motion or took any concrete steps to make the populace more tolerant or anything, or improve race relations in his country. His son, the prince, was a little boy when an assassination attempt was made on him. Oh, the game opens with this fucking Griffith-looking dude stabbing the king through the chest with a big-ass sword and being like, I am going to take over this country now. It's also really funny because, like, all the other members of they don't even, like, try to hide the fact that everyone thinks he did it. It's just that they can't prove it. His name is Luis. He's the big bad evil villain of the game. This power seeker who's killed the king, and as you find out years ago, tried to kill the prince, tried to get an assassination performed on the prince who was a little boy. The prince survives the assassination attempt, but ends up being cursed. The curse essentially acts like a terminal illness. And in order to protect him, the official story is made that he died in the assassination attempt. He is the only heir to the throne. And so that there are no other attempts on his life, they say that he died, and they essentially ship him off to live in a place where no one would ever give a fuck about, one of these Elda colonies. So he grows up around these people he was kind of told were inferior, ends up learning to be tolerant, and when he gets to be a little bit older, like I think the age of 10, he basically decides that when this curse is finally lifted from him and he can return back to society to reclaim the throne, that his goal, the world that he wants to create a post-racial paradise. His contribution to the country is going to be that he wants to bring all the different tribes together and make people equal and create an equitable society for everyone. Unfortunately, the curse is so strong that he falls into like a 10-year-long coma. And the reason that the protagonist is now setting out on this journey is that you are his childhood friend. And there's a couple very cute flashbacks of them being kids and sharing the dream of racial harmony together. There is this book, this fairy tale, which tells of a world that is essentially like ours, but one, again, where everyone is equal. And this is essentially like a utopic fairy tale that the prince strives for, and that the main character also adopts as that's what your ideal world looks like. That's the vision you want to achieve. So now, essentially, you are given a task. No one can fix this curse. No one knows. None of the most powerful mages, healing mages in the country can possibly hope to help the prince and lift this curse. Apparently, the only way to lift it is to just kill the person who cast it. That being Luis, who I think they say is the guy who cast it. I guess that's how curses work. We have to kill Luis to lift the curse. That's what the goal is. So that's why you're going, and like the initial goal is you got to infiltrate the military, and we're gonna set up this whole assassination thing. So the plot is pretty engaging. Maybe none of those themes interest you, but the way that they sell it is really strong. There is a constant element throughout the demo of the tension between the different races, from the little passing dialogue that you'll get to aspects of the environment. They really put a lot of effort into just being able to tell from looking at the world the way that society is organized. You walk into like the seedier parts of town and suddenly it's these lower races. It's like the dogmen and the other, I don't remember all of them. There's like 8 of them, so forgive me. Generally like the elves, like the pointy ear ones, the guys with the horns, those are generally like the upper class races, from what I can tell. I don't know how far the scale goes of like if they have like a strict caste system or something like that, but that's kind of how it goes. There is a point where there's points where, you know, your little fairy companion, who is a very classical Atlas fairy pal, basically tells you like, okay, yeah, we might get a little bit of trouble because you're an Elda walking around in the major city, and those are pretty rare. Like there's more than one character who tells you like, I've never seen an Elda before. People pick fights with you because of your race. Like they seem pretty committed to it as far as the content in the demo goes. Of the racial conflict is a persistent theme. I think if they carry that through to the end, and they capitalize on that and they actually do things with it, I think that can make for a really interesting game. It's not a topic. It's honestly, perhaps I'm ignorant, but I can't think of that many stories that come out of Japan that deal with heavily multiracial settings. There are those, obviously, especially in like the fantasy genre, but racial conflict tends to be like, that's an American thing. So it's kind of interesting to see it coming from a Japanese developer, and as far as I can tell, the handling of it seems to be pretty good. The characters themselves are really likable. I feel quite a bit for the character, like the guy the first friend you make, essentially, this guy named Stroll, this like semi-disgraced nobleman from the countryside, and he's got his own set of ideals. He's got sort of a chip on his shoulder because despite being noble, his people are considered kind of country bumpkins. And they're noble in name only, not really in fortune or land ownership or anything like that. So he's got these ideals of what it means to be a noble. He's really likable. There's this old grizzled veteran that you work with named Grius, who is a cool guy. There is the third main party member, like permanent party member from the looks of it, is you might have seen her. The red-haired German elf lady. What's her name? Harda Birken, something Herkenbreak or something like that. Don't get a ton of her. She joins a little late in the demo. But she's cool. I don't know, she's cool. A lot of the character designs are really neat looking. I dig some of the... You'll be walking around and you'll see someone and you're like, that is going to be a plot-relevant NPC. Speaking of, this game has a Persona social link system. From what I can tell, the social links... What do they do? I forget exactly. They tell you what it does when you level them up. I think it has something to do with your archetypes. Maybe you have to like max. It might be like you have to max them out before you can get the advanced version of the archetype. Every single social link that you form, much like how in Persona, when you form a social link, you there's like an associated arcana that social link like gives you the track for. You can get more and more powerful personas along that arcana track. In this game, they unlock archetypes for you, and I imagine that, yeah, it helps you level up your archetypes faster. I don't know. I'm not... Oh, wait, they do tell you. It's like... once you hit like level 2 on the social link with that character, you'll get like, oh, it's something. There are bonuses. I think one of them is, I think like when you max them out, they even tell you that you can do skill inheritance, which I believe in this game means that you can pick like warrior skills and equip them to like your mage, and it'll be shared as long as the character, you have like the, I don't know, you meet a certain level requirement on both, something like that. This game also uses the Persona calendar system, which I'm not sure exactly. There is a time, so you hit a certain point after the prologue is done where there is like a series, there is a time span. They're like, this thing is going to happen over the course of this many months. And there are times of day, and it's like, okay, you have stats. You have stats that you can level up that are like non-combat, much in the same way Persona has like charisma and intelligence and stuff. You have like certain qualities like intelligence, tolerance. There's just a couple others that you can level up by talking to different NPCs in the main city. But that will take up your day. And then at night you have like other time to spend. If you go into a dungeon, that will automatically take up, that takes up a chunk of time, a phase of the day. There is a very cute thing. I'm going to mention it now. It's not really that important. There's a cute play in all of, so the game's days of the week, it only has 5 days. And they are the names of the days, they're all fantasy made-up names, but they are based on the Japanese words for the days of the week. So Japanese kanji can have multiple different meanings. And every single one of the ones that is used to represent days also have other meanings, right? So as they are named in the game in English, I don't know how they're named in Japanese, I'd be curious. But in English, so for instance, what they've done is they've taken out Sunday and Monday, and we start on Fire's Day. The Japanese word for Tuesday uses the fire kanji. After that is Water's Day. Wednesday is water in Japanese. Thursday is Arbor's Day. Thursday in Japanese is the tree kanji. Friday is Metals Day, I believe, in Metaphor. It's Metals Day. In Japanese, it is the symbol for gold. And Saturday, this one's fun. The last day of the week is called Idol's Day in Metaphor. The kanji for Saturday in Japanese is the ground. And you're like, well, how does the ground correlate to idol? To the being idle? And that is because IDLE, not IDOL. That's because in Japanese they have this thing which is, they're called radicals. Essentially what it is you take one kanji and you kind of smush it down. You like shrink it a little bit or make it like narrow or short or something like that. And you combine it with a different symbol. Sometimes it's another kanji. Sometimes it is something that only appears as a radical. And that is like that's a new word. The kanji for taking a rest, like a vacation, for instance, is it's a combination of the symbols for the ground and a person. That is like it's radical. So visually it's like, a person, the idea is a person laying on the ground, they're taking a break. If you were going to go take your lunch break or something, that would be maybe a kanji that you would use to write that. So ground is like being idle. That's the off day. And if you're curious, Sunday is the symbol for sun. Very, very convenient, I suppose. And Monday is the symbol for the moon. So it's actually really easy to come up with like quick memory tricks to remember the days of the week in Japanese. Monday is Moon's Day. Tuesday is, fire, but that's like kind of an outlier. Wednesday is literally like wetness day because it's water. Thursday is I just think like Trees Day or something like that. Friday, you get paid on Friday. Get paid on Friday is how I remember it. So it's Gold's Day, or Keen. Saturday is the day of rest. Sunday is the sun. That's the memory trick of using it. It's something I noticed. I brought it up to a friend of mine who also studies Japanese, and we just found it kind of fun and cute. I haven't seen anyone else mention it because it's this very specific like language pun. I just thought I'd talk about it because I don't know, it's cute. Metaphor, the game seems like it's going to be really good, real solid. If you enjoy I would say if you like Atlas combat, this has got you covered. It's got some cool new ideas that they haven't done before. It's not just a rehash. It's taking the basic combat and it's doing something genuinely new with it for their standards. The story is great so far. And it is more, I would say, more serious and a little heavier than some of the Persona games are in terms of cultural commentary. If you were like, okay, yeah, Persona's cool, but it doesn't, the stories aren't like quite as interesting to you, and you like something like SMT, where the later games talk about human society and history and stuff like that. This game is probably more interesting. It's probably a little more on the level that might get you. So I would give, based on the demo, also the game's reviewing fantastically, so it seems like it is consistent in keeping that up. So if you need a JRPG to keep you busy for a while, and you want something with a really good script and some pretty cool combat, I would give it to Metaphor. I would say totally check out Metaphor Refantazio or Refantazio. I don't know. Also, if you play the demo, you can carry your save file across to the full game. They tell you that at the start, but I should mention it here. Also, they've mentioned that they are not doing the usual thing that they've done. I think they're changing their strategy. I know that some people have been a little bit burned by Atlas, where Atlas puts out essentially like revision updates to their games like a year after release. They just did SMT5 with Vengeance. They've done it with their last 5 games or something like that. I believe they've said they are not doing that for this. Any content updates will come in the form of an update to the game, to the base game, and not paid DLC. I don't even know if it's paid DLC, or not in the form of a new release. A little bit antiquated. I can't believe we let Pokemon get away with that shit for all the way up till now. Ridiculous. Anyway, Metaphor, good ass game. And now oh man. I've been going a little long, but I really want to talk about this one last thing. So I've been on a bit of a card game kick recently, and I got really intrigued because I was recommended a video about a game I'd never heard of. This is a tabletop card game called Flesh and Blood. The video that I was recommended was called Flesh and Blood is a Fighting Game. I'm a fighting game guy, so I go, oh, what's that? So Flesh and Blood is really cool. So first of all, I will mention that I have not gone out and bought any physical card packs. I'm planning on, depending on the price ranges, I might actually do it and just go down to my local game store and see if I can get together with some people. Because it seems like they have a somewhat active scene. There is a digital simulator. There is a digital client. It's called Talishar. 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 I don't think it's official, but they haven't done anything to take it down, and I think that's for the best, just because this game does a lot of things differently, and I think it's worth dipping your toes into to see, just to grasp the actual mechanics if you don't have someone to like explain it to you already. So I would recommend, you do have to like put a link. There's like a website where people upload decks and stuff. You can upload your own. You're probably just going to net deck something. You do have to put that link in. You can play on Talishar. You can play versus real people, but they also have bots. They have like a single player bot thing. You just like check single player and then you pick which bot you want to play against. There are two. There's like one that's just, they call it the combat dummy, which is probably just for like, I don't know, testing cards out or testing out interactions on your side. And then they have two different bots for the two different main like formats of the game. Constructed, which is kind of the main longer form version of the game, and then Blitz, which is a faster version of the game where each player has. Okay, so this is a hero-based game. I believe in Constructed, the heroes start with anywhere from like 40 to 50 or maybe even 60 health. I'm not quite sure. In Blitz, from what I can tell, most people start with like 20 is the average, so much faster. The games on Talishar took like 6 minutes, 7 minutes on average for me to get through. All that stuff out of the way. I would recommend checking it out in the Blitz format just because it's faster and a little bit more accessible. They have like heroes and card pools that are exclusive to each. They're mutually exclusive. Anyway, let me talk about what the game actually is. So Flesh and Blood is a combat-focused card game. I would say it's like a card battler, but it's not about, there's no, unlike Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or something, there is no summoning. You're not summoning monsters or creatures or anything. Essentially, you take on the role of a hero. You have a weapon, which is an ability that you've always got, and that you've always got equipped, that you don't have to draw into. It's not a part of your hand. And then your hand is essentially all attacks. And here's where it's like a little funky to explain, because it's a very cool system. Essentially, the way that it works is that your hero has it's a stat called Intelligence. Intelligence determines your hand size, and at the start of the start of the turn, you always draw up to that number, and I don't think you can go above that. Maybe there's exceptions. There's always exceptions in card games, but the standard rules are you draw to fill up to your hand total. So it seemed like a lot of them have like intelligence of 4. So I'm going to start the turn with 4 cards in my hand. When you want to play a card, every card has an energy. Energy is the main resource of the game. Every card has an energy cost to play. Typically, from my experience, 0 to 3. And it also has a cost where you can use it as a resource. And those are separate. So it has this mechanic called pitching, where there's like a pitch area on the board. And you can pitch a card, and it'll have a pitch value of, let's say, like 2. So you pitch a card to that area. You can't play it anymore, but now you have 2 energy to work with to actually play the other cards in your hand. Every card has an energy cost and an energy cost and a pitch value. And they're often not the same. There can be a card that you can pitch for 3, but it costs 1. There can be a card that you play for 3 energy, but it only will pitch you 1 energy, right? There are versions of cards that are worth multiple. There's versions of cards that will, like, you can pitch them for 1, 2, or 3. There's variations of them. I didn't say that right. There'll be like it's the same card, but there will be 1, 2, and 3 pitch variations. So you're using some of your cards as resources to cast your other cards. Every card pretty much has an attack value, like a damage value, where it can be which it will use when you cast it as an attack to attack your opponent, and oftentimes a defense value, which will come into play when you want to block. You can either cast it to attack on your turn, or when your opponent is attacking you, you can use it as to block with, and it will then be consumed afterwards. It is kind of meant to mimic the back and forth of a character duel, right? A character fight. You are not summoning creatures. You are using these attacks. And then in addition to this, pretty much every card also has like text and effects, and cards can be played. Every single card, like one of the reasons it was kind of overwhelming at first, but every card, I look at the card and instead of something where it's like, okay, in Yu-Gi-Oh, a spell card works one way. I cast it like this. This is how I use this card. And what matters is the effect, right? Sometimes the cost that's specified. Magic, works the same way. Sometimes things have dual purposes, but it's generally kind of limited. In Flesh and Blood, I look at a card and it's like, okay, this is simultaneously an energy resource to cast other things, an attack that costs a certain amount to play, a thing that I might want to save to block an opponent's attack, and it's got card text itself that changes all the little nuances and details, right? Some things can be played as abilities or as attacks, right? Some things have text that only comes into play when you use them as attacks. Complicated, nuanced, but really cool. If this sounds intimidating, genuinely, it is. It is a lot to like deal with at first, which is why I would recommend playing it on a simulator like Talishar, where there is no turn time limit against the bot, at least. And you can take your time, and you can play multiple times, and you're not having buyer's remorse. And it took probably like 10 games for me to win. I think it probably took me like 30 games before I won one. Or it felt like 30. It felt like a while. And I went from like, why am I not... what am I doing wrong? And then I kind of started to get acclimated to it and started figuring out how to look at my hand, how to look at what the opponent was doing, and start to pull information from that. So suddenly it's like I pull a hand and I'm looking at it, and the first thing I'm looking at is how much energy am I holding? How much energy to pitch am I holding? I'm holding 6. Right? There's 6 energy worth of cards in my hand to pitch, for instance. And as I play with the same cards over and over again, I kind of get used to these ones are more pitch fodder. They have effects, they can be used as attacks, but they're more pitch fodder. These ones are my big, like, blowout cards. Does 8 damage, and again, you're starting with 20. These cards can maybe be used for either. This one is like got a decent blocking value, so maybe I want to hold on to that. This one can be cast as an instant. Instants are like another, so like, again, suitably complex card game. The game has this system called action points. Actions are essentially, in most cases, it's like an attack that you make or a card that you play. And almost everything most card types will consume the action gauge, or will consume an action point. You only start out with 1. The ones that don't are called instants, and you can kind of just play those generally at most points in the game. So sometimes there'll be like a really good instant because, so for instance, I mentioned you only have 1 action point, which means, I can only declare 1 attack. So how do you start mounting a more potent offense where you are playing more cards, forcing your opponent to make decisions about what cards they want to use to block? Because when it goes over to them, they're only gonna, if you are going second, you have to, I believe that's the rule. If you're going second, when you block your cards, when you're going second, the opponent declares an attack. Any cards you use to block in that sequence, they call it the attack chain. When the turn goes to you, that's all you got to work with. All the cards that you've got left in your hand. If you blow all your cards on blocking, it's like, I can't do anything now. Right. So how do you start mounting a more powerful offense where you are attacking multiple times in a turn? And one of the key ways you do it, that, from what I can tell, again, I'm not an expert by any means. I've been playing for like 2 or 3 days now. One of the most important mechanics is something called Go Again. Go Again essentially means that when the card or the effect resolves, you get another action point back. You get refreshed. So I'm playing against the one bot that they have for Blitz format, which is called Era or something like that. Essentially, she's got like her weapons, which you always have equipped, cost like 1 energy to swing each. One of the swords does like 1 damage, the other one does 2. If you're going to swing both, you need 2 energy. However, they both have text that reads, if you have pitched a 0 cost card this turn, this weapon has Go Again. So the deck, from what I can tell, that I'm playing against revolves around having a lot of 0 cost cards that are very like efficient from a cost to pitch value perspective. So cost 0, but pitches you like 2 or 3 energy. So you pitch a 0 cost card, and then she gets to attack with both swords, and then gets an opportunity to play something after, assuming she still has energy left over. And then there'll be like a 1 energy card that deals like 5 damage, and it just says like, if this hits, if it deals damage to the opponent, Go Again. And if she has enough energy to pitch, can start fucking you up, and the damage can start adding up. So there's the fighting game analogy is you can kind of think of these things as frame data, where several cards that I've encountered have things have effects that, if you fulfill them, will give you Go Again. It's so I've got this one. I'm playing like this orc guy who's in the brute class, so he can use brute cards, and I believe some character specific or something like that specific cards. So I've got this one card which a lot of cards in this deck revolve around. It's kind of like a heavy hitter, high roller, semi-random, big risk-reward thing. So I've got cards where it's like, okay, this card has an energy cost to play, and in addition, when you attack with it, discard a card from your hand, a random card, then draw another one. So, you know, basically cycle 1 card in and out of your hand. If the card that was randomly discarded, which I'm assuming in real life, like you would hold up the backs of the cards and the opponent would pick one. If that had 6 or more attack, this card gets Go Again. So you build the deck to have a lot of 6+ attack cards. Therefore, when you play that, and that kind of serves as almost like your combo starter or your plus frames, you know, it gives you Drive Rush or something like that, or a Roman Cancel. You play that, successfully pull off the ability, the opponent has to block, and then assuming that you have enough energy to play something else, or maybe swing with your weapon, now they have to make the decision of, do they want to block with the other thing? You can kind of hide even more powerful cards behind having this one and kind of bait them into like, there are situations where it's like matchup dependent, or I can see like where learning the matchup becomes important, because it's like, I learned from playing against this bot of playing this one character that in the early game, I should look at how much energy she's pitched. I can afford to take like 3 damage, getting chipped down 3 damage at a time, as long as I make sure that I'm saving any cards to block. I'm saving cards for blocking with whatever the third thing that's coming is, because that's the one that's important. Because I would just block those initial weapon attacks, and then, I've only got 2 cards left, and now he's got this thing that deals 5 damage, and if even 1 point of that damage makes it to me, he's going to be able to play something else. So that's like the floodgate I actually have to stop and prevent from going through. So there's certain damage that it's actually like a strategic you have to like understand the deck you're playing against enough to strategically take damage at certain points, which is cool. It's not just all damage bad. It's this damage is okay to take because I'm saving my resources to prevent the big one, for instance. I'm sure it gets more complicated. I'm sure there's exceptions. I'm sure there's all that. It's a card game. Of course there are. But that's what I'm getting out of like my initial impressions of playing like maybe at this point 40 games. And understanding these systems and the way that the resources work is a lot of fun. It's been a very rewarding experience to go from like bashing my head against the wall, getting kind of frustrated because I don't understand like what is the bot doing that what am I not grasping? It feels like there's so many things going over my head because every card is so multifaceted, to now the point where I can kind of make strategic decisions. And if I get the right combination of cards and I get the right rolls and stuff, I can set up brutally unfair situations. Like, I can actually pull off setups and look at the cards in my hand and think about them and make those strategic decisions that are kind of unique to this game because of the way that the whole resource allocation goes. Characters also, in addition to having weapons equipped, they also have all these equipment slots. It's like head, chest, legs, and arms, I believe. And those are kind of like the armor that they're equipped with. I don't know how much variance there is. I've been basically focusing on playing this one deck, so I don't know how much variance there is in customizing that. But one of the most important equipment pieces that I've got is the leg pieces. So essentially what those do is, number one, you can actually block with them. Not all equipments can be blocked with. Most of them are like utility items, utility cards that are always available to you. Like the leg pieces that I've got, essentially what you can do is play it as an instant, and you can do this every turn. Play it as an instant. It doesn't go away or anything. It doesn't get consumed or destroyed. And you roll like a 6-sided die, and then you take the roll, divide it by 2, and you get that many action points. So if you roll a 1, it rounds down, by the way. So if you roll a 1, it ends up at 0, and you just wasted your turn, which sucks. If you roll a 6, you get 3 action points. Usually I have not had enough energy to pitch to make use of 3 action points. 2 is enough, I find, in most cases. But like, oh shit, like that's one way. If I don't have any ways to proc go again, I can kind of roll the dice a little bit and see if I can get a stronger turn or screw myself over. Oh, there's also a thing called the arsenal. Essentially, the hand size is limited and it's set, right? So I'm playing hand size limit 4. And I'm always going to have 4 cards in hand. There's a spot called the arsenal, and essentially if you have any cards left over at the end of your turn and the arsenal is empty, you can just put one there face down. You can put one of those cards there to use as essentially an extra hand slot, which comes in handy for setting things up. The decision making in the game is really fun. Wrapping my head around it and kind of breaking into it and feeling like I'm going to learn this matchup and kind of how this opponent works and how my deck works, and slowly getting to the point where I can actually consistently get wins over the opponent. I'm not sure how difficult the actual like AI is set to be, but I'm getting to the point where it's like, okay, it's at least 50-50. If not, I'm winning a slight majority of them. And that's really, that's fun, and it makes me want to, go play with, like, real people now. Because it's a very interactive game. When you would declare an attack, there's this whole sequence of blocking and reaction. So there's, like, specific, they're called, like, reaction cards. And you can play them during this attack chain. And it's not just blocking, it's like, you add this thing, and it's, has this certain effect, like, okay, if you block with this like reaction, this kind of effect occurs. You produce like, oh, it's like I'll do this thing, and it produces an agility token. An agility token gets consumed at the start of my next turn, and it gives the next thing I play go again. Oh, that's really powerful. That can help me like chain and combo stuff together. Yeah, it's been really fun. It's been really fun to learn. It's a cool game. It's got some ideas that I haven't seen done before. And I want to like genuinely check it out and perhaps even go. It's made me want to be a little bit social. Isn't that crazy? So I would recommend at least checking out the Talishar, like the digital client for Flesh and Blood. The website is very helpful. They have like an interactive, like walk you through a turn of the game kind of thing. I'm sure there's some good beginner guides. I'm just stabbing around in the dark and figuring things out for myself, but it's been a lot of fun. So Flesh and Blood, collectible card game, or is it a trading card game? Who knows? Very cool. I would definitely recommend it if you are interested in a new take, an innovative, to me at least, take on a card battler genre. Check it out. And it is, I do definitely see the fighting game analogies of plus frames and literally taking turns back and things like that. Sometimes you're just spent and your attack is minus. Sorry, you don't have any more cards to play. You just kind of have to like hold it. Sometimes you just got to hold that. And also apparently there are that initial video I saw of like Flesh and Blood as a fighting game did have some more direct, like, this character plays like a rushdown character. This character, like this hero in Flesh and Blood, plays like a grappler character. This character plays like a zoner, you know? So yeah, check it out. And with that, I am going to draw this to a close. My voice is tired. My stomach is hungry. And I'm also hot, and I want to shower soon. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you've listened this far, thank you for listening to me ramble. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below, but please phrase them in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. Check out my most recent video, check out my Patreon and my Ko-fi, and subscribe to all the 1 billion channels that I have. I think that's just about it. Goodbye.